Why not get yourself into the Buddha state? Then you will find that your desires will still work as strongly as ever, but instead of being for your destruction or other people's unhappiness, they will be for progress and value. And what's more, Buddhism said, here's the practice that will give you the power to enable you to sustain using your desires for value and happiness. So, of course, this is the very heart of Buddhism, isn't it? The great principle of Bono Soko Bodai, turning desires into enlightenment, is on your Gohonzon and at the very heart of everything. So, desires are vitally important. It's through the satisfaction of our desires that we originally, in the first year or two of our practice, get actual proof of the power of the Gohonzon. And then, as we practice more and more, and as the Buddha state takes a greater and more important position in one's life, so our desires quite naturally become more discerning. Instead of being desires based on hunger or greed of any sort, they become desires based at a higher level. This is a natural process as the Buddha state, or the high state of life, takes the ascendancy. So this is an amazing thing. No other philosophy or practice ever could believe that such a thing was possible. But the fact remains that the Buddhist practice does this. And this, of course, is its greatness. President Ikeda once said, some intellectuals say happiness can only be found in the spiritual world. I always answer them, can you live like a saint? Such statements are really haughty and hypocritical, he said, and I quite agree with him. So all the Buddhas have taught the realistic philosophy of benefit, from Shakyamuni down to this very day. And we shouldn't hesitate to expound it. Though we may get attacked by people who say, this is very selfish, or I don't like the sound of this, we should firmly defend it, because, in fact, not to practice for benefit is indefensible. So I really hope that we will always stick to our guns and argue firmly on this point. In the gosho, Happiness in This World, Nichiren Daishonin said, the sutra says the people there in my land are happy and at ease. And Nichiren Daishonin says, happy and at ease means the joy derived from the law. That is to say, the benefits derived from the law. And that quotation is from the Lotus Sutra of Shakyamuni. Then he goes on, you are obviously included amongst the people who are happy and at ease. And there in my land indicates the entire world. That is to say, nowhere else but in this life. There is no greater happiness than having faith in the Lotus Sutra. It promises us peace and security in this life and good circumstances in the next. This is the joy and benefit of practice. Right. So now I'll ask John to read on again after that important sentence we've just dealt with. But these days.
But these days, attempts to move the gods fail to have any effect, and appeals to the power of the Buddhas produce no results. When I look carefully at the state of the world today, I see stupid people who give way to doubts because of their naivety. Therefore, they look up at the heavens and mouth their resentment, or gaze down at the earth and sink deep into anxiety. I have pondered the matter carefully with what limited resources I possess, and have searched rather widely in the scriptures for an answer.
Thank you. That's so graphic, isn't it? Therefore, I see stupid people who give way to doubts because of their naivety. Therefore, they look up at the heavens and mouth their resentment, or gaze down at the earth and sink deep into anxiety. So we've done it ourselves, haven't we? I hope we're doing it less and less now. We see people everywhere doing it. Oh my God, I can't stand it. Looking up at the heavens in resentment, or looking down at the ground, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. It's so graphic. Everywhere we go, we see it. And it's because it's an unhappy world. People feel helpless and hopeless, useless, which is worse than anything, with no power to change it. We have to shakabuku, don't we? We have to teach others about the power of the Gonzen. I don't think we do look up at the heavens anymore and say, oh my God, what am I going to do about it? Or shake our heads and stare at the ground in hell. Maybe sometimes. But when we shake ourselves, we know we can pull out of it through the power of the practice. We must teach others. How can we go on denying this to other people? So, of course, people will reject it, people will object, people won't want to listen. But there'll always be some who want to listen and whose lives are really waiting for it. So we have to really think about this point. How often we stand on the station in the morning or at the bus stop and see people doing that very thing? It should remind us this is the world we live in, and we really must get a move on and change it. Okay, we should have a 10-minute break now and then carry on for another half an hour. Is that all right? Thank you very much. Okay, I'll ask John to read the last important sentence once again.
The people of today all turn their backs upon what is right. To a man, they all give their allegiance to evil. That is the reason why the benevolent deities have abandoned the nation and gone away, why sages leave their places and do not return, and in their stead come devils and demons, disasters and calamities that arise one after another.
Thank you. So, Nichiren Daishonin's conviction, of course, was absolutely complete. And I just want to ask John to read from two passages from the gosho called the Kamakura, that is the opening of the eyes, which was one of his most important writings. This will give you the feeling of that conviction.
The first one's from April 1979, Seikyo Times. Thus, over a period of countless lifetimes, men are deceived more often than there are sands in the Ganges, until they abandon their faith in the Lotus Sutra and descend to the teachings of the provisional Mahayana Sutras, abandon these and descend to the teachings of the Hinayana Sutras, and eventually abandon even these and descend to the teachings and scriptures of the non-Buddhist doctrines. I understand all too well how, in the end, men have come in this way to fall into the evil states of existence. I, Nichiren, am the only person in all Japan who understands this. And the second one from November 1979, Seikyo Times. Whether tempted by good or threatened by evil, if one casts aside the Lotus Sutra, he destines himself for hell. Here I will make a great vow. Though I might be offered the rulership of Japan if I will only abandon the Lotus Sutra, accept the teachings of the Kanmuryo-jo Sutra, and look forward to rebirth in the Western Pure Land, though I might be told that my father and mother will have their throats cut if I do not recite the Nembutsu, whatever persecutions I might encounter, So long as men of wisdom do not prove my teachings to be false, then I will never accept the practices of the other sects. All other troubles are no more to me than dust before the wind. I will be the pillar of Japan. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great ship of Japan. This is my vow, and I will never forsake it.
These are very moving words, of course, and emphasize his absolute conviction that what he believed was right, that he really was enlightened to the law of life itself. And so long as people were ignorant of that law, and therefore out of rhythm with universal life, these sufferings would continue. So Buddhism, of course, sees to the depths of human life and human activity. And what Nichiren Daishonin and all the Buddhas have seen and taught is that one's daily life and activities are just a manifestation of what we're believing or thinking in the depths of our lives. Every action, every word, every thought is related to that. If someone speaks to you, you relate it to what you believe, to what you stand on, to what you believe life is all about. So whatever belief or philosophy we have as a human being, it colors everything that we do, every little thought, every little word, and every small action, as well as the big ones. So therefore, what we believe in is, of course, of utmost importance, isn't it? So if someone says something against what we believe, we feel irritated or angry, upset in some way, deep in our lives, even though we may not show it or try hard not to. But nevertheless, we do radiate that feeling of anger, and it affects everything around us. Everything is colored by the way in which we relate things we hear and see to our own personal beliefs. So this is why Nichiren Daishonin, in writing these gosho, was saying, you must listen, please listen to what I'm saying. If what we believe in is distorted and wrong, then without even realizing it, our actions will reflect that in every way into our environment, and the environment will react accordingly. So, of course, we do gongyo every day so that we should renew our understanding and our pure belief towards Buddhism, so that we radiate and reflect everything based on that ultimate truth. At the beginning of that first quotation for the Kamakura, Nichiren Daishonin said, thus over a period of countless lifetimes, men are deceived by these wrong teachings. And as I say, this is not a conscious thing, necessarily. Sometimes it is. But mostly, ignorance breeds ignorance. Now, this is why Nichiren Daishonin was so strong in refuting these other teachings that he was surrounded by at that time in Japan. It was no good compromising. Of course, he prepared patient and careful argument and debate into order to prove the truth of what he was teaching. But there was no compromise. There could be no compromise. So it is these wrong fundamental thoughts which are coloring life in the world today and creating the situation that we see now. If you like, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, in what we see. So for just a moment, I'd like to look at this aspect of wrong teachings in a historical sense. And if in doing so I appear to be knocking down other religions, you must forgive me. That's not what I'm doing. Buddhism is very clear that all religions, all the higher religions, have and had an important part to play in the development of this world. But now we have reached the age of Mappo, when people have the intellectual capacity to understand the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, Shakyamuni said 3,000 years ago, that is the age when, to find happiness, they must understand the true law. So taking, first of all, the religion we know best, Christianity, and its history. As you know, in medieval times, the church had absolute power, related usually and closely tied with the political power of the day. So in many instances, people argue and scholars discuss how theology was bent in order to be the servant of the power of the church. And if anyone disagreed, they were persecuted by such things as the Inquisition and so on. So to give you one example, there are people who will argue that the worship of the Mother Mary in Christianity is to encourage apathy, softness, and weakness. In other words, to lay your head, if you like, on the Mother of Jesus' bosom when you're in trouble does not breed a strong sense of fighting spirit. Then, in another time of history, the church condemned, as you know, Galileo for saying that the world was round. And there have been many instances where, to break the grip of the church, the people have revolted, sadly. Many, many people have been killed. So you all know about the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Night, when so many people were killed at that time, thousands and thousands of them. You know of the persecutions of the Protestants by Queen Mary, the burnings at the stake. And after she had gone, the persecutions of the Catholics, when the same thing happened. The 30 Years' War was between Protestant and Catholic. It brought with it disease and appalling suffering and slaughter. Even up to the 18th century, there was a time when the church even was suppressing medical and scientific discoveries for their own ends. And right into the 20th century, we still see, to this day, violence in Northern Ireland between Catholic and Protestant, and the struggle which the Roman Catholic Church are having with the problems of birth control and so on. However fundamentally good and righteous an original teaching may have been, and no one can deny that what Jesus Christ taught was good and righteous, if it is not complete, if there are gaps, then the devil will enter, just as it has in Christianity, and caused more than 1,000 years of fighting and war. So of course today the church's influence has greatly declined, but in the West and in our own, each one of our own individual lives, the Christian moral teachings are very, very deeply ingrained. And I'm not saying, of course, that they're all wrong. Far from it. But these Feelings are very deep in our lives. Even to this day, I'm told, in Italy, in certain areas, a person can't get a job without getting a recommendation from his parish priest. This is a great way for the church to maintain control over the people. In Ireland, too, in the rural areas, such things continue. So Christ himself taught love and goodness and humanism, but it never has produced a peaceful world. We have to face that fact. It is an idealistic religion which certainly has produced good, but it's also produced an immense amount of harm. Then perhaps we could look at communism. This is a religion without a God, isn't it? Based on materialism. We all know that under Stalin, tens of thousands of people were slaughtered. The party became as absolute as the Tsars were in their day. And basing itself on materialism, it seems that anyone who was opposed to the regime could be disposed of in a materialistic way. It denied the dignity of individual life, and freedom has disappeared. We all know about Nazism. This was another form of religion or worship of ancestors. Nazism was partly based on worship of the nation or the race. 6 to 7 million Jews were killed by the Nazis based on that philosophy. And they say up to even 11 million, including the slave labor camps, suffered and were slaughtered during that time. Perhaps this was the most enormous tragedy in human history. But at the root of this, there was religion. In his lecture, President Ikeda pointed out that really, if it hadn't been for the traditional concept of Christianity towards the Jews, going back over centuries, such an evil era could never have begun. Even today, the Jews are being attacked. Their property in Paris recently, just as they were attacked in this country at one time. After World War II, there were many who criticized the Pope of that day because he never openly expressed his horror of Nazism. And of course, an inferior philosophy like Nazism is designed to breed fascism. But the fact remains that at that time the people believed in Nazism, and it colored all their actions. Then if you turn to Asia, India and Pakistan at the time of independence, there was incredible slaughter. I believe the official figure is about 500,000 killed, but the unofficial estimates is more like 2 to 3 million Hindus and Muslims slaughtered at the time of partition. This was without a doubt based on religion and very much on the exclusive, rigid caste system of the Hindus. I remember myself getting into a railway carriage when I arrived in Pakistan just as independence was after it had been given, and it was crusted with blood everywhere. Those were the times in Pakistan. Then Southeast Asia, where Hinayana Buddhism is practiced, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on, they have always been downtrodden. Through their history, they've always been conquered by one people after another. Hinayana Buddhism suppresses human desire. It's passive and breeds apathy as a result of that. A meekness, an inability to do anything against a conqueror. It's an interesting point that Hinayana was taught by Shakyamuni Buddha in order to overcome the effects of Brahmanism, which was very much concerned with minute-by-minute transient pleasures. This was the reason why, for several years, he taught Hinayana teachings at the beginning of his period of teaching and travel. So, returning to what I said earlier, if false teachings are ingrained in people's life, then they will color all their actions. And therefore it pervades all society. And therefore it creates, doesn't it, immutable karma, which exists, of course, in the lives of people and races and nations to this day. Through believing something, we create a most incredible power, force of thought and action, which spreads from ourselves outwards into our environment and then reflects back. So last of all, Japan. Most of us, having studied a lot, know about Japan's history. But as you know, before World War II, the military government in Japan determined to cause all other religions, including Buddhism and Christianity, to accept certain tenets of Shintoism in their own religion. In other words, to distort their teachings in order to include Shintoism, and especially the aspect of emperor worship, which they wanted to use to develop a militant nationalism. The people believed this at the time. They believed that they would win, that Japan had incredible power centered around the divinity of the emperor. And it colored all their actions. So President Ikeda said when he was giving this lecture, many people in Japan are still so shallow thinking and ignorant. Nichiren Daishonin said in one gosho, inferior teachings are the sake of the ignorant. Just rather similar to Karl Marx when he said religion is the opium of the people. So wherever you see hell in the world, the root of the trouble is religion and philosophy, the wrong teachings. So whatever may be our previous practice, the philosophy or religion that we previously believed in before we found the Gohons, we shouldn't cling to it from point of view of sentimentality. We should look at history and realize that the root cause of all the troubles of the world are those teachings. This is not to say that they didn't serve a purpose in their time, but to remember this is Mappo, when the true law can be understood by the people. In the Gosho, Embankments of Faith, Nichiren Daishonin said, Chang-an wrote, if you befriend another person but lack the mercy to correct him, you are in fact his enemy. In the bit that John read out from the Kamakura show, Nichiren Daishonin said, thus over a period of countless lifetimes, men are deceived more often than there are sands in the Ganges. There's no need for human beings to be deceived anymore. But of course, it means that we and our fellow members in most other countries of the world must get to work, mustn't we? We have to tell people, otherwise how can they know? So let's be strong on that point and have conviction in the greatness of this teaching of the ultimate truth or law of life. As Nichiren Daishonin said, I'll never give up unless someone else proves me to be false. We should have that same spirit and spread the teachings wherever we can, because in no other way will the evil in this world be eradicated. That I firmly believe. In this same passage, Nichiren Daishonin said, that is the reason why the benevolent deities have abandoned the nation and gone away. So this, of course, refers to the Buddhist gods. Just for a moment, let's look at this concept of God. So the God of all creation is one sort of God. So Buddhism's view of the God of all creation is that this was something which human beings had to conjure up, if you like, in their minds in order to justify the fact that there was some sort of a rhythm and pattern to life, that there was something that seemed to be in control. The very fact that everyone's view of God is probably different is proof of this. It is something in the imagination. So to some people, it may seem to a child like an old man, to others like some distant, incredible Mr. Who. Everyone has a different concept of it. As time is going on now, there is a trend in Christianity to call God or refer to God in a way which might indicate some sort of force or energy behind the universe. And of course, Buddhism then goes on to define very exactly what this force or energy is, which Christianity is unable to do. This, of course, is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and all the amazing teachings which explain the mechanics of how this force of life actually works. The second type of God, perhaps one might say, is the God of the ancestors, which I've already talked about in relation to the Nazis. And the third type of God is the Shoten Zenjin, the Buddhist gods or forces of the universe. So these forces, as we've already discovered, react to the state that one's life is in. If you're in a negative state, then those forces of the universe are likely to react negatively. Not likely to, they will react negatively to you. But if one's life is in a very positive and vigorous state, then the forces of the universe will react accordingly. So the sun, as I've often said as a simple example, can protect you if you are positive when you set out on a desert expedition and use your good sense and plan thoroughly and prepare for it and move vigorously forward. But if you dilly-dally and get lost and are foolish enough to set off without water, then the sun will destroy you. Even if you go on the beach in the hot weather in the south of France, the sun can get a long way towards destroying you, can't it? So this is the way all the forces of the universe act and react. Another example was given by President Toda. By slandering the law, we lost the war in Japan. As a result of losing it, freedom of religion, which was the first step to Kosen Rufu, occurred. MacArthur, who introduced this freedom, was acting under the influence of Bonten, Bonten, the Buddhist god and protector of the people. So, of course, that doesn't mean to say that Mr. Toda totally agreed with everything MacArthur did. What he was saying was that he acted as the agent of the force of the universe, which could at last bring freedom of religion to that part of the world. In the Gosho on practicing the Buddha's teaching, Nichiren Daishonin said, "When our prayers for Buddhahood are answered, and we dwell in the land of eternal enlightenment, where we will experience the boundless joy of the law, what pity we will feel for those suffering incessantly in the depths of hell." The land of eternal enlightenment isn't paradise or heaven, it is here, in this life, in this world, when each individual is practicing in such a way that their life is resilient and always moving energetically and valuably forward. The more, therefore, that do that, the more society as a whole will have the protection of the Buddhist gods. But if this fades, and due to various reasons, being the wrong teachings in people's lives, they become negative and apathetic, the Buddhist gods will disappear. And demons and devils, as this Gosho said, will take their place. So this, of course, is why social disasters occur and why natural disasters occur. The two, as I said at the beginning of the lecture, are totally linked. Every phenomena, the movement of the planets, of the sun, the moon, the rain, the wind, the animals, other human beings, every form of life, is there for nothing else but to promote and protect happiness. This universe is not supposed to be in disharmony. Our life and the life of everything around us is to protect the happiness of every other living thing. And it's beautiful and pure working in life. This is the reality of the universe as Buddhism sees it. Everything is interdependent. If we understand this and get to the depths of our lives through the practice of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, then we shall move in rhythm, and the more we teach others, they will move in rhythm. And so, once more, the benevolent deities, as the Gosho said, will reappear in this world, in all the corners where they've left it. And the devils and demons that are causing so much sadness and unhappiness and tragedy will gradually disappear. This is what we're working for. This is Kosen Rufu. Today is the 7th of December. 3 days' time, the high priest, together with 40 other priests, will enshrine the Gohonzon that he's inscribed for the peace of the world, and the whole movement for Kosen Rufu will be enshrined in the World Culture Center in Los Angeles, where it will remain until the center or the headquarters for these activities is finally established in some other place. These are momentous times that we live in. Very soon, Mr. Ikeda will visit us in June in Europe, and he's determined, I know, to visit every corner of the world and to encourage the bodhisattvas of the earth to strengthen their faith, teach others, and spread this fantastic teaching wherever they go. A new phase has begun. Definitely, provided we all continue strongly, Kosen Rufu will be achieved. It's a long, long way ahead yet in the next century. But our strength will grow sufficiently, as I said at the annual general meeting, to save this world from destroying itself. So that is what we're all about, isn't it? And that's what this great gosho is all about. And if you really study this great gosho, you will be able to debate about Buddhism with anybody, however much they attack you. And what is more, because you know the greatness of the teaching, you need never be arrogant. You need never be angry. You can always be polite and always courteous, because you know that you have the truth in your heart. And the fact that a person can't accept it or see it is because their life at this present time is still clouded by their karma. Still, they have to penetrate the depths of their own life a little more to really begin to understand the depths of the Buddhist teaching. So let's go on with the great work as we're doing it. Thank you very much for listening so patiently this afternoon. And see you all in 2 months' time. Okay, thank you very much. Many thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.